GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess I've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening, it's 11 o'clock. In a moment, headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And Nicola Sturgeon says Humza Yousaf will be outstanding as the new leader of the Scottish National Party. And at 37, he becomes the youngest First Minister and first to come from an ethnic minority background. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. He says he's honoured to be taking on the role.
I'm not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly.
Humza Yousaf speaking there. Now, a rapist convicted as part of the Rotherham grooming gang scandal has been ordered to pay his victim £425,000 after a trial at Sheffield Crown Court. Asghar Bostan had already been jailed for 9 years in 2018 for keeping and abusing a 14-year-old in his flat for 10 weeks. The grooming survivor, though, began civil proceedings in 2020 after she was asked to take action as a test case. She told GB News she felt proud to have brought her abuser back to court, hoping it would show others they could still get justice.
I hope that people see this as a landmark case and that the floodgates have just opened, and I hope that it brings hope to other survivors, but also I hope that the perpetrators that commit these crimes, not historically but present, know that if this is how they're going to behave, this is what they're going to get.
Well, in other news today, the Prime Minister says he's going to be taking a zero-tolerance approach to anti-social behaviour. Rishi Sunak today unveiled a £160 million scheme that includes forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their own communities. The government says laughing gas will also be banned by the end of the year, becoming a Class C drug. The Prime Minister said current restrictions on nitrous oxide just aren't working.
What we're going to do over the course of the spring and the summer is consult on the best way to do this to make sure that it is effective. Tackling supply is important. That's why we've gone out after county line gangs and disrupted 3,500 of them. It's why we've toughened up sentencing for drug supply. It's why the police have got those things called Project Adder, for example, which is a national programme to target drug gangs in particular. So all of those things help deal with supply.
And lastly, thousands of civil servants and public sector workers are going to be staging fresh walkouts next month. The PCS union says more than 130,000 members are on strike on April the 28th in a long-running dispute over pay, pensions and job security. Those are your latest news headlines. Now, headliners.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to take you through the best of Tuesday's top stories are two of the best top comedians in the country. We have Josh Howie and Paul Cox.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. Little before and after of a beard regrowth programme there. Or maybe of a beard elimination programme. It's hard to say which one of you has been using the product. Are you both well?
Yes,
I'm good, mate, but I can't figure out how to lower this chair, so I apologise. Please, can the directors start the camera here, because that's my gut.
You're between fasts.
I am between fasts.
There's intermittent fasting, and then there's a long period of non-fasting intermittently between the intermittent fasting.
In the meantime, I've got a big gut that everybody can see on television, and I can't lower this chair.
You need to get tailored top vest. That's what you need.
Trying to lower myself.
Let's have a... Stop trying to steal the limelight. Let's have a quick peek at Tuesday's front pages. We kick off with the Daily Mail, who have crackdown on nuisance Airbnb party houses, which is an interesting line to take. The Guardian, Doreen Lawrence, I was betrayed by the Daily Mail. We have the Telegraph, with retiring early is to blame for high rates. That's high rates of interest, I think, and other unwelcome economic factors, rather than high rates of people being unemployed. The Times have evict rowdy tenants in 2 weeks, and Harry there giving the big thumbs up. The Express, PM, I'll fight every day for our precious union, that in the teeth of the SNP election. The Daily Star, it's life-saving boffinry, Jim, but not as we know it. Space holds the key to beating Earth's diseases. Not sure we'll be investigating that one in much detail, but those were your front pages. We'll take a look in some detail now. So we begin, Guardian. Josh, if you wouldn't mind.
So there's two main stories here. Doreen Lawrence, I was betrayed by the Daily Mail. This is Daily Mail now being taken to court. Finally, we thought all that stuff was over, the whole news of the world and whatnot.
Was it the Levinson report? Was that the one?
Yeah, the Levinson. I mean, this seems like a long time ago, and
It was, wasn't it?
Yeah. And but the Daily Mail kind of at the time didn't really get caught in with all that stuff. But it seems like it wasn't necessarily about them doing the phone hacking thing. It was more they were doing a lot of private investigators and looking at people's bank details and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the people being Doreen Lawrence, who the Daily Mail famously supported her campaign at the time.
Yeah.
But she's saying she feels used, certainly finding out allegedly this information about how they'd sort of investigate her.
Well, is she worried that they used unacceptable means to get evidence against the killers of Stephen Lawrence?
I don't think it goes to that. I think it was just investigating her life and various other things, you know.
Because they famously had that front page murderous, didn't they? They said, we defy you to sue us. They were trying to get back.
It doesn't seem to be that it's like that.
No.
But,
fair enough.
But they, yes, she believes they failed her son. And there are some other people as well. It's not, there's Sadie Frost.
Hugh Grant?
Hugh Grant's not here, but Liz Hurley. So it just shows you how long this has taken to come to court.
Yeah.
Because probably a lot of our viewers weren't born when Sadie Frost
was worth bugging.
Was relevant.
Yeah.
Yes, was
There is always like a little bit of a danger, isn't there? If have-beens appear in court, you just kind of go, you'll do anything to get into the papers nowadays, wouldn't you, Liz Hurley? I don't know whether she would. I don't want to cast that aspersion.
No.
It does have a slightly different aroma to it. What have you got, Paul?
Next or on this?
Yes, no, on the next paper.
Yeah, so we've got the Daily Telegraph next, and it's particularly focusing here on the Hamza Yusuf and what's going on with the SNP today. And it says, I'll resurrect Sturgeon's trans reform, says Yusuf, which to me is possibly the stupidest thing he could possibly say.
That's exactly what precipitated the election to begin with, wasn't it?
It always felt as if he was Sturgeon or the Murrells man anyway.
The what man?
The Murrells, as in her husband.
OK.
And Team SNP.
Yeah.
So to say that he's going to resurrect this, I am sure there is members and SNPs that are within the SNP, that will say this is crazy now, because he basically wants to challenge Westminster, whereas he's got a great opportunity here to put this to bed and mess it up himself.
He has said, hasn't he, on previous occasions, he will bring down the union by any means possible.
Yeah.
But what he doesn't seem to realise is that some means are counterproductive. I mean, that will certainly create a clear, stark division between Westminster's line and the Scottish line.
And he doesn't have the support of the Scottish people for this. 2/3 of people in Scotland think it's a terrible law. And, I mean, he has a reputation for gaffes and whatnot, and also for running the health service not very well.
Well, I mean, you can tweak the figures. I looked on his Wikipedia page today, which, of course, has been edited multiple times today, and it was full of praise and laudation for his running of the health service, for his allowing it to revive after the COVID catastrophe and so on. Other papers will say not a bit of it. It's quite difficult to...
Well, he was famously convicted for not having insurance.
Yes.
Driving his car without insurance whilst being Transport Minister.
You need insurance?
Yes.
He had, and that was interesting as well, because, and this, I think, casts a slightly, I don't know, viewers may feel completely differently about this, but again, I read that on the Wikipedia page, just doing the research. That was the point at which his divorce came to light, which he had previously concealed. I mean, maybe you should conceal these things or not drag your family through it. He had become uninsured on his vehicle because following the divorce that had changed I think it had said, you know, this was an insurance policy for a married couple or something, and he hadn't adapted it. I do believe that was a genuine... I'm not casting aspersion, but it's a slightly odd way for it to come out in that respect, isn't it?
Sure, and there's just lots of little gaffes, like him and his new wife were sort of trying to sue this... a nursery, because they believe they were racist for not taking their child. Yeah. And then it turns out that the owner of the nursery was Asian. Or Asian descent.
He comes across more like a sort of petulant, vexatious activist kind of character rather than somebody capable of actually leading a nation.
He's perfect for these times, Simon.
Yeah, well, we'll find out, won't we? We would go to the front page of the Times now, Josh.
Yes, so they've also gone with something to do with the SNP and Yusuf, but there's a Labour eyes seat after Yusuf wins SNP contest. They think that they can win back 20 seats, so they're very excited about this. And I think there's an interesting dynamic now because... So far, they've been sort of wanting an election. Labour has been wanting this election quite soon to capitalise on all of the Tories' mishaps and whatnot and their unpopularity, which seems to be slowly being clawed back, which is why Rishi Sunak wants desperately to make it as long as possible to see if he can catch up in time. But now, because Labour could do well in Scotland, actually they have an incentive to also be pushing it back further, because it seems like the longer that Yusuf is in charge, he's going to sort of drive more voters back to Labour.
He's going to be the opposite of Rishi Sunak, who has calmed everyone down. Yusuf is going to be divisive.
Yeah, and exactly that. I think give Yusuf a year and Labour will have more seats in Scotland. They're not going to go to the Tories, and already I should imagine there's a few SNP members or voters that would consider changing.
Because he didn't have... It wasn't a decisive victory, but then I wasn't really following it beforehand. 52-48, of course, this channel regards 52-48 as a sacred ratio, doesn't it, virtually? But, I mean, it does seem to be the devil's ratio, doesn't it? It just seems to come up again and again. And I say again. I'm sure I have seen
it. And that 48% are definitely the most clever.
Yeah. Don't tweet me!
Well, to be fair, I think Kate Forbes would have been a very, very good leader for the SNP.
I quite agree.
And I'm a unionist, so I was quite glad that she didn't. I'm very glad to see Hamza Yusuf.
It's quite interesting how she was the one who was pilloried and attacked for bigotry, essentially, for her religious views, which... there's a guy called Alan Massey, I think his name is Alex Massey, who writes for The Spectator. He writes a Substack as well, which was excellent, very detailed about the history of the Kirk, that particular branch of really quite unreconstructed, unreformed Protestant Christian belief of which he is a part, and how it was absolutely central to Scotland's destiny and its resistance to Westminster's powers and so on. It was the defining character of Scottish nationalism for decades, if not centuries, and it has suddenly become completely unacceptable.
Well, it became this big deal, and then Yusuf turns out that he'd not been at the vote himself, and had sort of come up with these excuses that he had a meeting and whatnot, but it was all a little
It's interesting how different religions at different times are subject to different degrees of interrogation to some extent. You've got one other story in the Times we should try and hit before we go on.
Well, there's two. Which one? There's the children addicted to video games, and they're attacking families, it's gone up a lot because of lockdown and whatnot. There's like 750 patients have been seen, and they're just spending money online, like stealing their parents' credit cards for these loot boxes and whatnot. And the other one here is evict rowdy tenants in 2 weeks. Now, this is part of Rishi's climb back, where he's sort of cutting down on laughing gas and all the fun stuff out there.
Yeah, he's gone full Asbo, hasn't he?
But there's stuff that I totally agree with and constantly frustrates me that hasn't been dealt with in terms of littering and whatnot.
It's quite interesting. One of the stories, I don't know which paper it was on, they focused on the Airbnb guests. There are certain houses that have been turned into Airbnb party houses, and I happen to know a couple of people in sort of Brighton and Hove for whom that's happened. Next door neighbours go away every weekend, and the place turns into a animal house.
Yeah, and it does get a mention in this Times column actually. But it must be terrible. We've all stayed. Have you stayed in Airbnbs?
Yeah,
making an assumption. The one next to Simon.
They're wonderful, but they're often just taken advantage of, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, certainly the big ones in the country. I actually had a mate who that was his kind of line of work. You buy a house, do it up, flip it, sell it, move on. And that's all fine. But the way there's that new line of work, nice big country house, and you rent it out for a week at a time in the summer. And it wasn't until like the third or the fourth one, and his neighbour said to him, "Mate, it's not working for us."
By the way, I got in trouble for staying at one of these places for not cleaning the microwave. The inside of the microwave. We clean. We're very good cleaners, my wife and I, and we hadn't cleaned the inside. And they sent a big long letter and complained to us about.
Just get a sheet of foil and pop that in there and do it for a couple of minutes.
Good hint.
Finally, our friends at the Daily Star, very quickly before the break.
Absolute craziness going on here. It's life-saving boffin-ry, Jim, but not as we know it. This story. I mean, I'm not even entirely sure what this story is. I keep reading it and I have to lift my glasses up, but it's classic Daily Star, to be honest. They're talking about zero gravity, Simon.
Oh, OK. Yeah.
Supposedly,
well, you can get boots for that, can't you? You can. I think we've run out of time to give that the credit it needs. That's the front pages. Coming up after the break, we have got Corbyn, Rishi, Gary Lineker and 7 types of binge. You won't want to miss it. See you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. How long? Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, and Josh Howie and Paul Cox. So, Tuesday's Times, we kick off with Corbyn saying he's not going anywhere, Paul. And that sounds plausible to me, I must say.
Sorry, we all knew he wasn't going anywhere anyway. Well, Jerry B. Corbyn to run against Labour independently. He's going to be stopped, isn't he?
Sorry, carry on.
He's going to. I thought you were referring to me, Simon. Sorry. He's going to be stopped by Keir Starmer. And, you know, if we thought that Hamza Yousaf was bad for the SNP, then old Jezza is a disaster for the Labour Party. And Keir Starmer's done, as far as I'm concerned, done all the right things to sideline Jeremy Corbyn, particularly given the EHRC inquiry and the things that came out of that led to him being sidelined.
He is in a difficult situation, isn't he, Keir Starmer, in this regard? I mean, he's clearly very much made a very clear pathway going forward for himself. But there was a time in most people's memories when Keir Starmer wanted Jeremy Corbyn to become the Prime Minister of this country and backed him wholeheartedly. I understand, you know, that is politics is a funny old game and there's always some level of opportunism going on. There's also, more problematically, I suppose, you know, there may still be millions of people, certainly hundreds of thousands, who will legitimately think Jeremy Corbyn got extraordinarily close against Theresa May, with a very powerfully assertive manifesto, long before the complaints of anti-Semitism and so on really came out. And that since then, Starmer has sort of drifted into red Tory territory. I don't know.
Sorry, very quickly. They'd be right to say that. In 2017, he did do very well. However, then the country got to see 2 years of Jeremy Corbyn, and everything happened with Brexit and all that around 2019. And he was revealed to be what he is.
Which is an anti-Semite. And I'll say that. And Jeremy Corbyn, you're welcome to sue me. He won't. He hasn't sued anybody who's called an anti-Semite. I'm guessing because he knows he'll lose. There's enough evidence out there. This is my mastermind subject. And I think this is very clever of Keir Starmer to deal with the issue now rather than later. Legally, the NEC, governing body of Labour Party, is allowed to deal with people who they don't think are best for the party in terms of getting them elected. That is the reason why they've chosen to essentially deselect him.
But what would happen if he was to stand in his Islington constituency as an independent, where he has won, I think, for 12 elections on the trot? He clearly is pretty popular, although he's getting on a bit. You know, they might feel it might depend who Labour, you know, stick up against him. But
it's me, and I'm declaring my candidacy now.
If he were to win, would that be a significant embarrassment to Starmer, or would that just be fine?
It's worth it. It's one seat compared to having Corbyn and the toxicity of that far left.
Imagine, though, that Corbyn's seat was the one that tilted the balance and that created the coalition, and he made it dependent upon
Corbyn and Labour coalition. I think he will win. He will win in the
I actually don't think he will win, but that's just my personal view.
But that's, you know...
and
that's
he hasn't, by the way, he hasn't definitively declared that he will be standing. It's just the friends of his will say that he will. And he should retire. He should retire in disgrace, frankly. He took Labour to the worst election it has since 1935.
It just shows you what a rollercoaster those years were. It was bizarre, because 2017 people felt that he did
better than was expected. I don't think it was that he...
No, that's true. And Theresa May was absolutely appalling at electioneering. But the thing I'm interested in now, I suppose, which hasn't been mentioned in this, but which is sort of brewing beneath the surface, what about Rebecca Long-Bailey? What about John McDonnell? Is he likely to take away a breakaway?
Let's see how they toe the line. They're all saying, supposedly, there's been some breakaways already, saying, look, Jeremy, don't do this.
Right.
Within that camp. And Keir Starmer's tough. And, you know, when they all signed this Stop the War thing with Ukraine broke out, basically sort of saying, hey, make peace with Russia, guys, he just instantly went... You take your signature off or you're out of here. He's hardcore. I respect it.
I think they should elevate him to the House of Lords. That would be the most painless method. Anyway, Josh, Metro are on Rishi's case for doing what we've all done, let's be honest, after 5 minutes in a black cab.
Mate, I do this all the time, mate. All the time.
Right as rain.
Yeah, Rishi Sunak ridiculed for using geezer accent during a visit to Essex. And...
having a bubble.
Come on, we all do it. We're in a taxi, we've had a pint, we're like, all right, mate, what time is the shift finishing?
Partly because it's actually a very human characteristic and not a bad one to try and sort of communicate in British.
Mirroring, isn't it?
But also, I think with Cockney or whatever accent you want to call that, it's quite fun to speak like that.
Yeah.
It's quite enjoyable. You feel yourself freeing up a bit.
That's the only accent I can do properly, you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's one thing to go Yorkshire and start falling in with that. Then I always do feel a fraud. And I do it. I hear myself. If you go for a pint after a show and 4 or 5, locals, and pretty soon you start hearing yourself,
By the end of an Edinburgh run, I've got an
American accent. That would be a good joke in itself. You should do that. That's excellent. Now, I do feel that Rishi is a slightly anxious, nervous performer still. I do think you've got to recognise by his own standards, or what the stall is set out, he's done very well in his time in office so far. He's steadied and stabilised tremendously well. I think for me, his weakest card, his weakest suit is that kind of front-facing at the podium with an audience. He comes across a bit like a wannabe Tony Blair.
And interestingly, you'd never get Boris Johnson doing the geezer accent thing. He would he leans the other way into the posh idiot.
Yes.
And unapologetic about it.
You know, that's a really interesting point, because as stand-up comedians, we do generally fall into one or two camps, don't we? Either authentic selves or characters. You know, Al Murray, pub landlord, actually a modern history graduate from Oxford University. You know, I've always thought it's quite interesting that the character act actually knows who he is more. It's easier to stand your ground, And so, for instance, if you do a bit of banter with an audience as a character act, it's quite easy to come up with the perfect comeback, because you just think, what would the pub landlord say to that?
You can get away with more as a character.
Yeah, I mean, my character on stage is very much an idiot. And then it's not a character.
The mask eats into the face. Move on to the Telegraph next. It's emerged that more than 60% of transgender prisoners behind bars in Scotland only began transitioning after they were locked up, Josh.
Yes, so more than 60%, yes. This has just come out in the Telegraph, and it turns out that 19 transgender prisoners are in study, 12 of whom, which is 63%, were recording, they began their transition after their date of admission to the estates.
Throwing obvious, unless any viewers have not picked up on the implicit...
Well, the idea is, of course, that it's ingenuous and not real. And there are 5. I think there are 5 people at the moment, 5 men, biological men, in women's prisons. 4 of them are there for violence, not sexual violence.
There's
but
no
violence
way it's
still.
true, is there? That's the point of this. There's no way that 60% of these men actually are transgender or have gender dysphoria.
That these criminals who have...
Well, because they want to get into women's prison. And we know society is only, is less than 1% of society is transgender. So what's the odds that most of them are in Scottish prisons?
It is possible, I will say this, it is possible that they suffered, and I'm hesitate to use the word suffer in the case of scrotes who commit sexual offences of this kind, but that they were suffering from a degree of unresolved, sexually oriented mental illness beforehand, which they have maybe conceivably lunged at the idea that maybe they were trans, because that is becoming a fairly sort of default life raft for people who feel that they can't quite understand themselves at the moment, which wasn't really available for them.
Either way, they should not be going and sharing spaces with women.
Absolutely
and it's incredible and disgusting that this has happened in Scotland and has blown this whole thing skywide. And then everybody still says, oh, it's such a culture war issue, it's only one person.
Well, then drop it. Go back to where we were. If it's these people who say it's a culture war issue that we're getting distracted by never want to concede the ground. They never want to concede the point. No. They want you to concede the point so that they can just win the culture war and move on to the next outrage against common sense. That's what happens. On to Tuesday's Daily Mail now, Paul, and this is an utterly rubbish idea.
Yeah, what a load of rubbish, absolutely. It is a mad story, though. I mean, this really did make my blood pressure rise a little bit. New waste plans that could see UK households have as many as 7 different bins. They're talking about collecting paper, cardboard, metal, plastic, glass and garden waste in separate bins.
Paper and cardboard in separate bins?
Yeah. In separate bins, so 7 different... I mean, I pay greater than £2,000.
I've got a photo there.
Look how close the garden and glass, the 2 colours are the same.
Now, us 3 have all got houses like that, but most of the country haven't, have they?
That house has got...
I've got a tiny flat.
I've got that dormer window on the top, and I have to ask Mrs. Barrett if I can borrow some milk. I noticed that they got through a lot of sauce... Can we have another look at that graphic? Sorry. I noticed they got through an awful lot of saucepans that week.
Oh, it's
metal recyclables, never mind.
I know, but the idea is it's going to cost 500 million
it's insane.
to implement. That's not even fully to implement it. And, of course, you're going to have the extra trucks driving around as well.
But there's no... There we go. Look all the saucepans in. They got through 4 saucepans in 1 week. My observation is that there's already nothing like consensus as to how to do this. My parents live in Norfolk. They have 3 coloured bins outside their kitchen back door, and they are absolutely religiously devoted to correctly apportioning their waste to them. And then my dad has a compost heap in the back garden, and he gets furious if so much as a tea bag finds its way into the non-recyclables. But we in Hove, we don't have any bins. We just have massive shared communal wheelie bins, sometimes as much as 100 metres from your house. I have to walk out in all weathers with the kitchen bin liner until I find the nearest one, and sometimes it's full, and find the next one. You don't have any... unless you pay for a garden waste bin, and then you've got a sort of arrangement with the council that they'll
Well, I think this is what the government put through a law last year to standardise this across the country. And they're saying the only way they can do this is by creating this massive system.
I think standardisation might be a good idea, although obviously there are different considerations,
7 bins,
rural and urban, all the rest of it. But that ain't gonna fly, mate. Ash,
not
goer.
Get your bins
away.
away.
Quick break now, but we'll be back afterwards with a population bomb, an obsessive sperm donor, and lucid dreams. Don't go away.
Oi, oi!
Run around now.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Switch. Welcome back to Headliners. Tuesday's Guardian to kick off the second half or third quarter. We have Tuesday's Guardian, and it turns out the population bomb may be more of a population whoopee cushion.
Well, exactly. World population bomb may never go off as feared. Study finds. Quelle surprise, Simon. Bonnet de douche, Rodney. Because, you know, this is just on the back of a number of predictions. I mean, this actually, I think The Population Bomb was a book by Dr. Paul Ehrlich, which was in 1968, in which it's been spoken about a lot recently, in which he said by the end of the 70s, because of overpopulation, the world would starve, and we find ourselves...
There will be hundreds of millions of people dead. We have basically may as well write off India. It's too late to save India. There's no way. Extraordinary.
And, you know, what are we, 55...
And this very organisation who've come up with this latest survey is the Club of Rome, who first produced a report called The Limits to Growth, I think, around that same time, maybe even earlier, which is another one which was just absolutely wild and way off.
Probably one of the people that were predicting an ice age during the 80s. Yeah. I mean, it's 55 years later, and we're now saying it's unlikely to happen, and everyone's fat.
Yeah.
So there has been no starving.
No. I mean, there has been technological advances in agriculture, in fertiliser, in hydroponics, blah, blah, blah. There's been a lot of advances which have confounded what might have been their modelling, but there always have been.
Yeah, of course.
And there always will be. Who knows? Or maybe one day
they
won't
weren't factored in, and what they're factoring into this study, which makes it somewhat unique, is if, as the developing world gets more money, becomes more educated, then they're going to have less kids, and that's going to happen. And more importantly, the more that's invested in that part of the world, and this, I think, do you remember Constantine Christensen? He did that speech at the Oxford Union recently, where he basically said that. He said, if Indians don't care about... No. They're the biggest polluters, and they want to feed their kids and give them a life.
Good lives.
Yeah, exactly. The quicker that we can make those lives better or help...
Well, currently, even India is below replacement level, amazingly below replacement level. Almost everywhere. All the places that 10 years ago were causing fear and consternation in Central America, the open border across Mexico... They are right down. I think they may be around 2.2. The only part of the world where there is still above replacement level fertility is sub-Saharan Africa, and that is possibly still a kind of a mindset that came from an era when your children would be lucky to make it past the age of 5.
I just want to say that I read a thing about how they find it very difficult to get contraception
Yeah.
to the women in sub-Saharan Africa.
That's where all of it's got to be aimed. But yeah, of course, the thing with the Club of Rome is they see this as entirely a good thing, right? Because it's easing off pressure, but they aren't really addressing themselves to the problem of an ageing population.
No.
So if we don't continue to have kids, then we've got a different problem, right?
We seem to be incredibly brilliant at looking back at the past, at history, at the things we know and criticising it and blaming us all for it. But every time anyone's asked to look further than 2 days in the future, they get it wrong every single time.
And I mean, these people are well healed. You know,
These are
well remunerated for their efforts. The Club of Rome is not some bunch of guys standing around a brazier.
No.
You know what I reckon? I reckon we'll stuff it right up. I've got to stop doing that. Tuesday's Mail. Surely we have now found a candidate for my favourite progressive criminal sentencing option.
Indeed. Dutch musician 41 faces court bid to halt his obsessive sperm donation amid claims he has misled women on his way to fathering 550 children around the world. Now, he is called Jonathan Jacob Major, or as I call him, Daddy. And yes, he's misled hundreds of women all across the world. One of these women has taken him to court after finding out that he'd had like more than 100.
Yeah. Supposed to limit it to 25. I think.
Yeah, when you sign these forms or whatever. And she's saying she's worried about the consequences this had for her child. And that's the bit I didn't really understand.
Well, incest, I suppose, right?
Well, if there's 550, but if it's all around the world, it's pretty unlikely.
But, yeah, incest is the very reason they stop at 25 locally.
Yeah.
I mean, he did 10 different clinics within the Netherlands themselves. I mean, in about 25 years' time, that part of Europe's going to look like royal families from the Middle Ages. They're all going to have these crazy disfigurements.
Look like our king looked exactly like Tsar Nicholas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I do wonder whether, as you say, 550 spread out. I suppose it's a bit like parking zones, where they go, you can only park here for 2 hours, and then you've got to find the next parking zone so you can start again. Yeah. Is it if you get far enough away that you?
Well, also, if they're not registered in any way, how on earth do you know that your daughter is not marrying her brother in 25 years' time? You don't know. There's been cases of this in the past. There was a Netflix documentary. It escapes me the name. I've been trying to think of it. But there was a Netflix documentary where exactly this happened. And these people just kept coming out of the woodwork, And with DNA now...
Oh, yeah, he was a fertility doctor, wasn't he? But this guy is definitely like the Genghis Khan of sperm donation.
Yeah. I wonder what he's driven by, because he doesn't look... When I've seen his pictures, he's not particularly handsome. He doesn't look particularly like a ladies' man, you know what I mean? He doesn't look like some kind of lounge lizard.
I think he enjoys the process. So.
Yeah, but does he? But he doesn't. He's not having sex with them, is he? I don't think.
No, I don't think he's. No, he's definitely not having sex.
I don't think he's doing it via a syringe.
There is something. It must obviously become some kind of. I mean, the word obsessed doesn't seem to be unreasonable. It's not. Presumably, it's not incredibly profitable. I don't know.
Well, you're speaking to someone with 5 kids, so I can't really talk about it.
He hasn't got to look after any of those 500.
Maybe if you offer him to have a couple of yours to just calm him down. Anyway, stick with the Daily Mail. Mental health, Paul, and it sounds like bipolar people really do burn the candle at both ends.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? Having a mental illness could be taking an even greater physical toll on your body than more previously thought. And this is after a study shows that someone with bipolar is genetically kind of 2 years older as a result. Now, I don't think it's huge news to say that people with mental illnesses are feeling the strain a lot more. Yeah. Because when you've got a mental illness, and, 99% of people have got a form of mental illness at some point in their lives, the toll of life is taken at some point. It stops you eating healthily, you overeat, you don't exercise.
And you worry.
And you worry, and
the thing about mental illness that I think is often missed is a lot of it is experienced as worry and anxiety, isn't it? Because you're aware that something isn't right, and that might in itself not necessarily be ageing. I think it's the strain of coping with it rather than the thing itself. If that doesn't, I mean,
I feel seen.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's different. Someone with bipolar is like they're saying that because they can now take those cells. And they can work out that they're like aging cells, so they're kind of accurate how quickly you're aging. So people with bipolar are like 2 years older, but depression is like a year, anxiety is 0.7 years. But I think that this is very interesting, but I just wonder if maybe they shouldn't have published it Because if you're reading this and you do have depression, you're
On top
like,
of everything else.
oh man, what? I've got 2 years. Oh, come
Well,
on.
on that basis, let's move on to The Cure, Tuesday's Guardian. And if your mind feels full, you might benefit from mindfulness.
Indeed, mindfulness better than CBT for treating depression, study finds. It's quite interesting. So mindfulness sort of essentially is a bit of meditation, also sort of living in the now. I don't know if anyone's read The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, fantastic book. And the idea is that you read this, people were given this self-help book for 8 weeks and then 6 consultant with a counsellor sessions, as opposed to the usual, I think you get 16 just normal therapy sessions. Yeah, CBT. And it had a 17% increased improvement of people's mental health in terms of bringing them out of depression. So, and also, it's a lot cheaper for the NHS.
The thing I find interesting about this is that I don't know a great deal about it, but I know a little bit. My wife had a little bit of postnatal depression and used CBT. And I've read a couple of Ruby Wax's books. Ruby Wax has made herself a bit of authority on this. She's written 5 or 6 books, highly acclaimed and by people who know what they're talking about mindfulness CBT as a sort of a type. They're not very far apart. That's the point. Mindfulness is, as you say, a kind of waking meditation, a kind of walking, everyday meditation, just being aware of the present moment and staying in it. CBT is basically about being aware of your thoughts and spotting when you're going into a negative spiral that won't get you anywhere very useful, and just recognising when your thoughts are becoming self-reinforcing, catastrophising. They're pretty similar kind of mind. It's not like they're saying mindfulness is better than Prozac, which I think it is definitely a good message as well. But these two things are quite close together.
Well, I think it's like CBT, but the mindfulness element is adding it to the discussion. So you're having this book, and I think it's the two together that seem to work better.
Yeah. Well, I do think there's something to it. I think mindfulness is great. Have you tried it, Paul?
I have tried it all. I've had 2 sessions of CBT, 2 6-week sessions. Actually, the NHS give it away freely at the moment.
That's good.
It's used a lot.
Right.
But I didn't find it particularly useful. I don't think it works for everyone. It draws your attention to certain techniques, which is great. Mindfulness, on the other hand, really helps a lot, I find.
Yeah.
Particularly, if you're out walking or if you're writing or whatever you do during your day.
Yeah.
If you can just focus on that moment in time, you now feel a lot better for it.
There was a very interesting infographic I saw came out about 6 months ago in relation to a big wide meta study that showed that human beings were happiest when they were concentrating what they were doing, regardless of whether it was something they wanted to be doing or not. They were happier if they were peeling the potatoes, but at least concentrating on peeling the potatoes.
Distraction, isn't it?
Yeah, than they were if they were doing something they might think of as a nice thing, but were actually like their mind was elsewhere. Concentration.
And did you start CBT after starting here, right?
Yes.
We'll get you through it, Paul. One more before the end of the section. We have Tuesday's Times, Paul, and is this real life or is this just fantasy?
Can you really choose what you dream about? This is lucid dreaming. Now, question for you both. Have you ever lucid dreamed?
I've done it once. I do remember it, and it was an extraordinary experience, but I've not managed to replicate it.
I dreamed I was on television.
You are.
Red lights.
I don't think I have. There is one dream where I knew I was flying and thought, wow, this is cool, I'll fly over there, but I don't know if that was a lucid dream. However, it's incredible. I mean, they're bringing some doubt into this actually as part of this story. They're talking. One of the people involved was saying, was it because they'd been given LSD? They didn't quite believe it. I'm sure microdosing with mushrooms or something could induce something of this nature. But it is truly a phenomenon, and these things do happen. There's a comedian, David Green. I don't know if he's still a comedian, but it was a guy I used to gig with years ago. I've noticed on his Instagram, he's virtually, I think he's making a living out of this now. Okay. He's drawing in his dreams and selling those drawings.
Wow. That's interesting. I haven't heard of that. My only experience of that one time was I felt amazing afterwards, like that for the whole of the rest of that day, and indeed a couple of days afterwards. And I hadn't even directed my... When you're lucid dreaming, you're aware you're in a dream and you can choose to live out fantasies or whatever. But I hadn't directed it into any, lived out any kind of long-cherished fantasy. I did fly a bit, and I do have sort of flying dreams sometimes, but they're always more like walking in the air. I'm not kind of like Superman. I'm almost just kind of like you might be when you scuba dive, just sort of paddling about. It's a wonderful feeling, though. Even just being aware that you've dreamt possibly, I think, is quite good, because sometimes you wake up and you just think, I've just lain in bed, kind of.
So could you not have a lucid dream that you've forgotten about? Is that impossible? Is that?
No, that is possible, I think. But
so maybe we've all.
I can still remember this one. It was 20 years ago, I think.
They say that most people have maybe one in their life.
Yep. Anyway, last break now. Join us in a couple of moments. Don't drop off to sleep and try lucid dreaming. We'll be back in 2 minutes with single rings, lost cats on dating apps, and a true sight to behold, the Pope in a puffer jacket. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. For our final quarter, we begin with the Mirror, and this police chief has an unusual method for fighting crime.
Sure does. Colombia's top police chief says he uses exorcism and religious rituals to fight crime. This is General Henry Sanabria, and he supposedly caught Pablo Escobar. He's loads of people. He's caught like the head of the FARC leader, Alfonso Cano. And he's basically putting it down to his religious beliefs.
Yeah.
And
just like actors do on Oscars night, and
I just want to thank God for bringing Pablo Escobar into the machine gun.
He says, though, quite specifically, he believes in the devil, that's a little bit stronger, isn't it? He's seen the devil, he's experienced the devil, he's witnessed the devil. I don't know whether he means going into certain sort of drug dens or whatever, but he believes in the devil as a physical, like an operator, a thing with agency in the real world.
Well, we should be clear that it wasn't black magic that got Pablo Escobar. Yeah. It was 8 Colombians with big guns, wasn't it?
I was thinking of the chocolates then, black magic. Yeah. So that, like the secret stash.
That would have been
push one of those outside for the munchies.
Would you like one of these?
They were agents of God.
they were agents of God. Do you know what? Because I thought I'm going to look up how they caught him. Have you ever seen the photograph of when they caught?
No.
They just all stood around him. All the guys that shot him, and he's lied. Wow, it's terrible. And I know it's going to be 5 o'clock in the morning when someone else hears this, but there's a dead guy laying on rubble, and they just all stood around him with their thumbs up, like having a selfie with him.
He was so wealthy. He was just like so much cash in the jungle, wasn't there, that it was just being eaten by insects and stuff.
Yeah,
It was
rotting.
Yeah,
in the
just
heat.
rotting heaps of cash.
Incredible.
So I mean, if you're going to be the devil, I suppose that would be quite a, I can understand
He's doing good with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's a traditionalist. But he said on International Women's Day, he said, the charm of a woman makes her husband happy, and if she is sensible, she makes him prosper. A discreet woman is a gift from the Lord. Which, that's on his Hinge profile, I think.
Pretty based. Yeah. This is from the Daily Mail, and this British woman is blatantly harophobic, Paul.
Well, here we go. This speaks to me, this does. A woman sparked a debate after revealing she struggles to connect with colleagues who were privately educated. Tell me about it. You were privately educated, weren't you, Josh?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I've absolutely no idea I've no idea what he's saying.
Geez, mate, come on, man. Don't bug
This is
me
where
off.
Rishi needs to learn like Rishi Sunak, just to bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Simon, were you privately educated?
I was not. I went to university to study law and suddenly found myself completely surrounded by it. Everyone else was privately educated. And I did sort of adopt their mode as best I could.
I had the opposite. I went to my uni, Goldsmith. I went to Goldsmiths.
Having been privately educated.
I did go to private school. Yeah. And then that's where I was like, all right, mate, yeah. And it was like a sort of thing of shame. But I do agree with her.
That's the Jamie Oliver kind of approach, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, the Mockney thing. Yeah. But I do agree with her, and there is a sense of entitlement that you get from public school and privilege and all of that stuff. And, having 20 years working in the comedy industry has totally beaten that out of me.
Go on.
Sorry, Sam. Interestingly, do you ever feel it the other way around? Do you ever think there's like this comprehensive school kind of mentality that you just can't ingratiate yourself with? Do you ever look at me and think, oh, I just couldn't have...
Mate, I don't even think about you.
I think maybe, 30 or 40 years ago, there was more of a gulf in terms of opportunities and stuff. I will say this, I do absolutely know this, because my kids have gone to private school. It has remained quite a bitter source of dispute between my wife and I, but they went anyway. And I've become aware, it's actually... I know this sounds ridiculous pleading, but it is quite literally a disadvantage. If you emerge from comprehensive school and private school, two identical children with the same grades, the comprehensive child will be offered much better university offers now. Far more likely to get into Oxford and Cambridge, far more likely to get offered 2 Bs and a C from Russell Group universities. I mean, that may be reasonable because they're trying to compensate. If you've paid £250,000 to put a child through private school, you presumably believe that it will boost their grades. If you don't believe that, you're a mug, right? Why would you do it?
You know what I thought that I got from private school is this kind of sense of possibility.
Yeah.
Like you're surrounded by a lot of wealth and you see these people around, you think, oh yeah, I could do stuff.
Yeah.
Even if I don't
could
have
go
any
on holiday with them. Anyway, we've got to move on quickly. We've got the Daily Star. Flashing your ring seems to be the way to get ahead now in the market.
Sorry, people are wearing singles rings to let others know they're on the market. Now, this seems to be one of those adverts. There's something called a pair ring for like 20 quid.
Yeah.
And you wear it. And as this article, though, points out, why is a bloke's going to wear it? Oh, there it is there, and just look incredibly desperate.
It looks like you support some horrible charity or something.
And if a woman wears it, she's like, the argument goes, well, she's going to get more hassle.
It really isn't difficult to dress in a manner that makes it fairly obvious you're on the pull. I mean, even I know that.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm glad you appreciate this jacket.
We finished the show with this story from the Daily Mail. It feels like something isn't quite right about Pope Francis in a puffer jacket.
Oh, yeah, AI image of Pope Francis in a puffer jacket fooled the internet and experts fear there's worse to come. I'm ashamed. I saw this. I thought it was really funny. I thought, oh, what? He's got a great jacket. How cool. And it was
He does
fake.
look cool. He does look cool.
And it was totally
there
fake.
He is. There he is.
Look, I thought that was real.
I thought it was real. He looked like he's in E17 in that Christmas video.
I mean, it is white and it is kind of sacred. He's got the big cross.
Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also he just looks banging.
AI is so scary now, though. It's going to... I mean, these kind of things are just...
We are not going to be able to trust anything soon. And genuinely mean this. There's going to come a time very quickly that we're not going to be able to trust anything.
And they can do it with your voice as well. There's a fellow sharing a video he's made online of Kanye singing some lyrics he's written about Kanye's own woes. And it just, to anyone, I mean, I'm not an expert.
It's crazy. I'm not even here.
No. Show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. The Daily Mail, crackdown on nuisance Airbnb party houses. The Guardian, Doreen Lawrence, I was betrayed by the Daily Mail. The Telegraph, retiring early is to blame for high rates. of inflation, etc. The Times, evict rowdy tenants in 2 weeks. The Daily Star, it's life-saving boffinry, Jim, but not as we know it. Space holds the key to beating Earth's diseases. That was the one story that managed to evade our penetrating analysis really this evening. That's all for our show tonight. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Paul Cox. I will be back with Headliners again tomorrow at 11 with Leo Kearse and Roger Monkhouse. Another very strong lineup. Remember that if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show just after the break. Otherwise, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. It's Simon Evans. Thank you very much. Good night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people